In this short video, we're going to show you how to take blue skies from this to this at the touch of a button, or from this one to this one, again at the touch of a button. Now, I'm aiming in many of my real estate videos to keep post-processing to an absolute minimum, so if at all possible I want to avoid going into an external program like Photoshop in order to composite different images or work on multi-layered documents. So this video is going to give you a very simple method for pulling a lot more blue out of what may seem like a rather dull sky. But please note, if you really are shooting on a grey day and there's very little colour to work with in your raw file, and I do recommend you shoot raw for this method, then there's not going to be a lot you can do. You will have to drop in a blue sky, and I'll do a separate video on how to do that with alpha channel masks. But for now, we're looking at images where we've got something going on, like this country house. I've gone for quite a warm colour balance here because there was a nice golden light on the house, but of course if the image is quite warm, then the blue sky that we're after is not going to be as blue as it could have been. So there's a way of quickly progressing to something punchy like that by going not to the white balance but to the hue and saturation and luminance controls in this tab here. And what I've done here is very simply go to the saturation section here and pulled up the blue channel. I've increased the saturation, and as I do that it really does wonders for the sky. Of course you can go off the scale and it becomes psychedelic, so a certain amount of punch can be given to the saturation channel, but also you've got this luminance control, and I quite like at the same time to pull down the luminosity of the sky as well. That's the equivalent of sort of using a polarizer filter out of doors. And all these controls are working specifically on the blue channel. So as long as there's nothing blue in the actual house or the actual subject, then you can freely play with these sliders and really come up with quite a nice satisfying sky solution. That's our original, and that's what I've gone to in no time at all. Now, I've actually saved these color adjustments as a very simple blue sky preset, which is comprised of about, well, it's plus 40 blue on the saturation side and minus 30 on the luminance, and it's not a bad place to start. So when I say it's done at the touch of a button, it really is at the touch of a button. You can hit that preset and come up with the blue sky like that. So not a bad quick and dirty fix. I can do exactly the same thing with this image, hit the blue sky preset. Think I'll go for a bit more control, so let's go in here. And what I've actually applied here is on the luminance side of things, minus 30, and on saturation I've actually whacked that up to 72. But of course it's not affecting anything in the image because there's nothing blue in the image. Now, just draw your attention to this one in particular. I was really keen on this nice yellow tone. So white balance wise, I could have gone for a cooler white balance and intensified that blue sky. Let's just go back to the original shot. So there's my white balance. I could have pegged that back there and got a nice blue sky, but look what it's doing to that rather nice warm strong yellow. As I go more blue with the white balance, the yellow is suffering. So I set my white balance to give me a really nice strong golden glow to that yellow hue there, of course at the cost of the sky. But by playing with the sliders in the hue, saturation and luminance tab, I've been able to pull back that sky to something nice and strong and saturated, and certainly good enough for selling purposes. So this method works pretty well as long as there isn't something blue in the subject, because if there is something blue it's going to be intensified disproportionately and look really arresting. So if we look at this garden shot where I've got these blue flower plots and applied the preset, those pots are going to start to look a little bit overdone. Now I could probably get away with this for simple real estate purposes, but let's say that was a nice big blue swimming pool in the foreground there, and I applied the blue preset. That really would start to look distorted and strange. So we're going to have to try a little bit harder this time, but I hope to show you it doesn't have to take that long to get to a nice blue sky. So what we've been doing up until now is using the saturation and luminance sliders to make global adjustments to the image, meaning they're going to work on the blue right the way through the image. And what we're after is a way of locally changing that blue. So it won't work by using the Hue, Saturation and Luminance tab, because that's affecting the image globally. So if we go back to the original scene, what we're after is a method by which we can take that sky down selectively to a bluer, cooler tone. And I mentioned earlier white balance, because I pegged the white balance here in such a way that I got a nice golden tone in the body of the garden. But ideally my white balance would be down here in the cooler blue area, and that's already doing wonders for the sky. So what I'm going to do is apply a local adjustment to the sky using the white balance and one or two other controls to take that down to something more satisfying. So by opening up the local adjustment brush tool, I'm going to select temperature and set a bit of negative temperature. In other words, we're pushing the temperature slider towards the blue end, and I'm simply going to brush over the sky with a fairly broad brush, and that already is starting to bring some nice blue tone to it. I'm going to do a couple of other things, which is pull down the highlights slightly, which is just going to help with pulling out tonality from that sky area. It's quite bright, so just by pulling the highlights down, I'm actually intensifying the hue of the blue. And of course we've got this nice saturation slider in here as well. I can tweak that to just give that blue that we've created with the temperature slider a little more punch and saturation. Now we've got this rather awkward tree here, and I would draw your attention to a control that you can use in conjunction with the local adjustment brush, which is Auto Mask. And Auto Mask will recognize when it comes up close to an edge, for example that building. As you're painting, I'm going to put on the mask overlay tool here. It will deposit the effect on the sky, but where it meets something very different in tone, like those tiles, you can see here that it's not actually depositing any effect. So it's applying the blue adjustment, and again showing you the overlay. It hasn't deposited any colour on that tiling. It's not so easy with branches. So here what I would do sometimes is, and I'm going to leave the mask on so you can see the intensity of the colour, I'm going to apply a lower density figure. I'm going to take that right down to 25 maybe, and I'm going to paint in between these branches. Well, I'm going to paint over the whole thing actually, with less of an effect than I've applied to the main sky area. And we'll pull out a bit and show you how that's looking without the mask on. We're just going to drop in a bit of blue around those branches. So rather than painting with 100% density, we've just taken that effect right the way down. We want it here nice and punchy, but over here it's not happening so much. It actually doesn't take very long to take that sky up to something nice and saturated, independent of the warm white balance that we've set for the scene itself, and without creating a rather unnatural colour shift if we happen to have blue elements in the scene.